Welcome to Biology for You. In this video, we are going to discuss plasmid isolation. In the series of videos, we have been discussing different methods in genetic engineering. So, in this very video, we are going to have the basic idea of plasmid isolation. We already discussed genomic DNA isolation, but the strategy that is applied for the genomic DNA isolation will be different from the plasmid isolation. So here we are going to have that idea and what exactly the plasmid is and why we need to isolate the plasmid and what are the methods in it. So here let us first start with what exactly the plasmid is. So here plasmids are basically extra chromosomal DNAs. That means these are not part of the genomic DNA. So these are independently existed from the genomic DNA. So these are present in the external part to the genomic DNA. So let us start with the bacteria. The outer cover of the bacteria is known as cell wall, and underneath there will be a cell membrane. So here, by attaching with the cell membrane, there will be genomic DNA, and this genomic DNA have all genes responsible for the normal survivability of the bacteria. But here there will be small suspended forms of genetic material, that is DNA. We can also found apart from this genomic DNA. So these are extra chromosomal parts of the DNA is known as plasmids. So these are the extra chromosomal DNAs present in the cytoplasm which have independent existence. They do not dependent on the genomic DNA. So that is what plasmid is. So generally these plasmids are found in the bacteria, but we can rarely we can find them in some plants and yeasts. So coming to the different characters of the plasmid. These plasmids are generally double-stranded DNAs. Plasmids are double-stranded DNAs which are in covalently closed circular forms. That means these are not linear DNAs, these are circle forms, and also these are covalently closed. That means the covalent bond makes the complete circularization of the plasmid, and these are having self-replicating ability. That means they have their own origin of replication. So because of the presence of the origin of replication, they can replicate itself without depending on the main chromosome. And also they have independent existence, and also they'll maintain some high copy number. That means independently they can replicate, so they'll be replicating and maintain the many number of copies of them. So that is called high copy number. And these are very small. These plasmids are comparatively very smaller than the genomic DNA. That means, say for example, in E. coli, the major chromosome will be around 4000 and above kilobase pairs, and the plasmid will be up to 10 to 100 kilobase pairs only. So that is the vast difference between the plasmid and the genomic DNA. And these plasmids are mostly in supercoiled form. So mostly they present in the supercoiled nature. So these are the basic characters of the plasmid. So why we need to isolate plasmid? As we already discussed, plasmids are generally used as vectors in the genetic engineering experiments. There are many other kinds of vectors, but most widely used vectors are plasmids. These plasmids having like simple structure and also very small in size, they have self-replicating ability, they have independent existence, they have selectable markers, that means they have some resistant genes, and also they generally have some restriction endonuclease sites. All these characters makes the plasmid very much suitable for the manipulating it as a vector. So to do anything with plasmid, to study various genes present in the plasmid, or to do any molecular biology experiment with the plasmid, first we need to isolate the plasmid without contaminating with the genomic DNA or any other cell components. So that is what we are going to discuss now. Basically, for the plasmid isolation, the differentiating characters from the genomic DNA will be considered to isolate the plasmid. That means basically these plasmids are differed with the genomic DNA by two characters, two major differences, that is size and the conformation. Here, as we already discussed, the size of the plasmid is very much smaller than the genomic DNA. And coming to the conformation, these are mostly present in the supercoiled forms. So, based on these conformational differences, we can isolate our plasmid. Here, majorly, there are 4 methods. One is non-boiling method. Second one is boiling method. Third one is alkaline method. Fourth one is cesium chloride density gradient. So these 4 methods are majorly helpful to isolate the plasmid. Here these 2 methods are based on the size variation, and these 2 methods are based on the conformation differences. So coming to the first method, which is non-boiling method. That means here generally the cell extract is treated with basically we'll be starting with cell culture. These cell cultures are centrifuged, and from these cells we are going to isolate our plasmids, and to that cells we are going to add EDTA, lysozyme, and the sugar. Here, as we already discussed, based on the size we are going to we are going to isolate our plasmid. That means here this bacteria, as we already discussed, having main chromosome which is attached with the cell membrane, and these plasmids will be freely suspended. So here these are very large. If you break the cell wall, burst open, if you break the cell wall at a time, and if you make the cell burst, if you cause the cell burst as we generally do with the genomic DNA isolation, this makes the cell burst, makes the cell walls to burst open, and here we are unable to separate this genomic DNA from plasmid. Plasmid may be lost. So here we are not going for the harsh detergents like STS, but here we are going to use mild detergents like Triton X. And also here this Triton X, lysozyme, EDTA, all these are used to make punctures in the cell wall but not the burst. So here cell wall will be broken for sure, but it is mostly similar to this, like the cell wall will be broken but cell will not be burst, so that here the main chromosome will be still in contact with this cell membrane. And these kind of partial dissection of cell walls discs are known as spiroblast. So here these spiroplasts are formed, which are partially digested cell walls, so that the main chromosome will be still attached with the cell membrane, and plasmids are plasmids will be come out into the solution, so that with the cell debris, the genomic DNA will be precipitated with the cell debris and other cell components, and in the solution we can find the plasmid DNA. So that is the basic concept of the size variation, size based methods. So here in the non-boiling method, here we are going to add EDTA, lysozyme, sugar and Triton X. So here this EDTA and lysozyme majorly is an enzyme which breaks the cell wall, and in presence of the sugar like sucrose, so high concentration of sucrose will be used in this procedure, so that the cell wall will not be burst, but the spiroblast, the partial dissection of cell wall is allowed and spiroblast is formed, so that the chromosomal DNA will be attached with the cell membrane, and plasmids will come out of the solution, come out into the solution. All remaining components, cell components and genomic DNA will be precipitated. So that is how this non-boiling method will be worked. Coming to this boiling method, the principle is the same. That means here is also spiroplasts are formed, and the plasmids will come out into the solution, so that plasmids will be easily separated. All remaining cell components and the genomic DNA will be precipitated. The principle is the same, but the ingredients will be somewhat different. That means here we are going to use 100 millimolar NaCl and 1 millimolar EDTA and 5% Triton X or 20. So any detergent with mild activity, which are not like SDS, which makes the cell burst. So here we are going to use these ingredients: NaCl, which helps to produce pyroplasts, and this EDTA, and this is a detergent, mild detergent, and also here we are going to boil at 100 degrees centigrade. So these all ingredients are added into the cells, and we need to boil at 100 degrees. Towards the end of process, spiroplasts are formed. Plasmid will come out into the solution and can be easily separated. Coming to so these two are the size based separation methods. So coming to the advantages of the size based methods, these are very easy to proceed. If you have many number of samples to deal with, then you can just go with this size based on isolation methods. So coming to the disadvantage, the major disadvantage is the purity of the plasmid. Here we should be compromised with the purity of the plasmid, that may be contaminated with the genomic DNA or maybe RNA. Here we can improve the quality of the product by additionally using RNases. So these are the enzymes degrade the RNA. They may be added during the lysis buffer, in this lysis buffer itself, or maybe after the purification of the plasmid we can treat the plasmid with RNases. And also we can also add salts like lithium chloride, calcium chloride to improve the purity of the DNA. So by these two methods we can improve the quality of the DNA, but we cannot get anyhow we cannot get 100% purity of the plasmid by this size based isolation methods. So here these alkaline method and cesium chloride density gradient methods are basically based on the conformational difference between genomic DNA and the plasmid DNA. So coming to the alkaline method, here pH related changes makes the plasmid to isolate. That means, okay, as we already discussed, this plasmid will be in supercoiled form and genomic DNA will be in relaxed form. So here any kind of pH changes, pH disturbances makes the genomic DNA to be degraded or easily denatured. But if you increase the pH, it is almost like impossible to denature the DNA of the plasmid. So here based on this principle we can separate plasmid DNA. Here in this alkaline method we are going to use 3 solutions. This solution 1 contains pH around neutral pH. It is neutral pH, that means pH around 8, and this solution 2 will be having increase in the pH. That means here we are going to give alkaline treatment so that the increase in pH will be drastic. That means the solution will reach 12 to 12.5 pH, and once after reaction with the solution 2 we are going to add solution 3 which is having the pH around 5.5. That means there is a decrease in the pH. That means here generally with the genomic DNA at this stage at neutral pH will be normal and the plasmid will also be normal. But at this higher pH, when it reaches by treating the cells with the solution 2, the increase in pH causes xenomic DNA to denature, and plasmid will be the same. And during the third step, again the pH is lowered down into such level that the rapid renaturation happens. So here the xenomic DNA will be rapidly renatured. So due to its rapid renaturation, there will not be proper complementary bonds will not be formed. The proper two parallel strands will not be easily coupled, but there is a clump or aggregates will be formed with the xenomic DNA. This clump formation will precipitate the DNA, and these plasmids will be the same in all the cases, all treatments. So that is how the xenomic DNA will be separated from the plasmid DNA. So here what are the chemicals that makes these pH changes? So in the solution 1 we are going to have 25 millimolar Tris HCl along with the 10 millimolar EDTA, and in the presence of RNase. So here the pH will be normal and both the DNAs will be maintained. And in the second step, the solution 2, which is having alkaline pH, having 200 millimolar NaCl and 1 millimolar SDS. These are the ingredients in the solution 2. So here this high alkaline treatment helps us to increase the pH of the solution. Here in the third solution there will be 3 millimolar potassium acetate. So here this potassium acetate decreases the pH. So the rapid renaturation happens in the xenomic DNA. So these are the major ingredients present in the 3 solutions. So the cells will be treated with solution 1 first, and later solution 2 will be added, solution 3 will be added. So rapid renaturation will be happen, and plasmid will be the same, and plasmid can be easily separated. The all cell wall components xenomic DNA will be same time precipitated, and by giving with the ethanol treatment we can be assured of the purity of the plasmid by this alkaline method. So here in the fourth method, that is cesium chloride density gradient. So this is the last method. This is also based on the conformational difference. The plasmids can be isolated, and here we are going to use ETBr. So this ethylene bromide is basically an interchelating agent. That means it incorporates into the double strand of the DNA, so that between A and T base pairs generally, and it interchelates and denatured, localized denaturation will be happen. If this is the DNA, the ETBr, so this will be intercalated between the base pairs, that causes the local unwinding of the DNA wherever it incorporated. So by that it denatures the DNA, it decreases the density of the DNA because of the denaturation. So here, as we already discussed, there is a conformational difference between the xenomic DNA and plasmid DNA. Xenomic DNAs will be in linear form, relaxed form, and these plasmid DNAs will be in supercoiled form. So, if you treat ETBR, excess ETBR in the lysis buffer, then the xenomic DNA will be easily denatured, but the plasmid DNA will not allow the ETBR to incorporate in it. So the density of the bond density of the xenomic DNA will be completely decreased, but the supercoiled plasmid will not allow the ETBR to incorporate into it, so that the bond density of the plasmid will be maintained. So here, when the cells are treated with excess ETBR, this ETBR will go and bind between the base pairs. So here, when they are ETBR treated cells will be added to the cesium chloride density. So here, this after centrifugation, we are going to have, as we all know, this density gradient. In this density gradient centrifugation, there will be density gradient. That means there will be different layers are separated. This cesium chloride have property, it has high density, and the high density cesium chloride will be reached at the bottom, and towards the bottom to top there will be decrease in the density of the cesium chloride. So here the lower parts will be higher in density, the upper layers will be lower in density. So this is cesium chloride density gradient. When you add this ETBR treated cells to the cesium chloride, once after centrifugation, along with this cesium chloride, wherever the ingredients which are added in the centrifugation, they reach the same density of the cesium chloride layer. That means if they are high in density, then they will reach the bottom layer of the cesium chloride. So it matches with the density of the cesium chloride. So likewise, the RNAs will reach the bottom, proteins will be at upper layer, and this plasmid, because of the high bond density than the xenomic DNA, they will migrate well in the density gradient. So that will be plasmid, and xenomic DNA, which lost its bond density, may not migrate well in the cesium chloride density gradient. So that will be settled at the top layers of the centrifuge. That means this is xenomic DNA. So here, once the plasmid is separated easily, and we can just puncture here to isolate this layer, then you can give ethanol treatment to get pure plasmid. So that is how the cesium chloride density gradient centrifugation will help us to isolate the plasmid. So here, this cesium chloride density gradient method is very much efficient to give high quality of the plasmid. That means we can also have 100% pure plasmid in this method, but the disadvantage with this cesium chloride density gradient method is the cost effectivity. That means it is not at all cost effective, very expensive method. So these are the methods generally adopted to isolate plasmid DNA.